The Tonight Show studio buzzed like a crowded beehive under warm stage lights. Audience members pointed phones at the famous blue curtain, waiting for the moment it would sweep aside. Cameramen checked angles. Producers paced with tablets, and the warm-up comic finished his last joke before running off stage. It felt like any other taping. Laughter, neon colors, Jimmy Fallon's name splashed across digital billboards. But anyone paying close attention could sense a crackle in the Iran Extra pulse. As if something unscripted was trying to push its way onto the set. The roots of that charge stood just off stage in the shadows. Clint Eastwood, tall even at 95, wore a simple charcoal suit that looked almost military. His weathered hands held a folded piece of paper tucked into his breast pocket. Assistants whispered reminders about camera marks and cue cards, but he hardly blinked. He wasn't here to sell a movie or smile for a meme or trade funny stories about directing legends. He had spent the whole ride to the studio staring out the window, jaw set, as Manhattan's skyline flickered by. Now a faint echo of that same skyline glimmered on the glossy floor in front of him. He exhaled once, low and steady, like a man steadying a rifle. On stage, Jimmy Fallon bounced forward with trademark energy. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a real treat tonight." He called an Oscar-winning director, a Hollywood icon, Mr. Clint Eastwood. The band struck a playful tune from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. The curtain opened. Applause thundered. Phones flashed. Eastwood stepped into the light. He didn't wave. He simply nodded, one hand still hovering near that hidden paper. He crossed the stage in deliberate steps and shook Fallon's hand. For a split second, their smiles matched, but Eastwood's melted into a straight line before the handshake ended. The audience kept clapping, but their cheers had a question inside them. Is he happy to be here? Fallon launched straight into nostalgia. "Clint, people still quote Dirty Harry on the street. Does that ever get old?" The crowd giggled, ready for a flirty answer. Eastwood tilted his head. "People remember honesty," he replied, voice gravel over steel. Harry said what he meant. Fallon's grin faltered. The reply felt heavier than expected. He recovered with a chuckle. "Well, you've had, 6 decades to figure?" Out honest lines, laughter. Eastwood didn't even smile. Trying again, Fallon teased, 95 and still directing. "Do you ever get tired? Or do you cancel naps like you cancel culture?" This was meant as a playful jab, the kind that usually earns cheers. Instead, Eastwood leaned forward, elbows on his knees, scanning the studio seats. "Cancel culture," he said slowly, "is just cowardice wearing headphones." No joke, just that sentence. The audience's laughter thinned, unsure where to. Go Fallon's eyebrows lifted, sensed the needle shift, felt the engine of his show shudder. He tried a safer lane. Okay, let's talk social media. You ever tweet, Clint?" The band offered a drum rim shot. Eastwood's answer came cold. Social media lets people fire bullets without powder. Nobody stands by their words. They shoot, hide, shoot again. The studio lights seemed to dim, though no technician touched a dial. Fallon sipped water, then flashed his widest smile, the emergency shelter of every late-night host. "Folks, he still talks like Dirty Harry." Few scattered laughs quickly swallowed by quiet. Eastwood wasn't done. "Jimmy, generations before yours built this place on risk. They told stories that scared people. Now everyone's scared of stories." Fallon raised his palms as if calming an approaching storm. "We love stories here. We celebrate them." Eastwood shook his head. "No, you celebrate trends. Trends vanish, truth stays. And truth is suffocating under your neon lights." Backstage, a producer mouthed cut to commercial. At the director in the control booth, the director hesitated. RATINGS, gold and reputational danger seesawed on his. Headset on stage, Fallon pressed forward, heart thumping beneath his suit jacket. "Clint, do you regret any statement you've made that people called offensive?" Eastwood's reply was ice cold. Regret comes from lying. I haven't lied. Fallon swallowed. The audience sat motionless, thousands of eyes glinting like tiny lenses recording history. He leaned in, voice softer. You said you brought a message tonight. Want to share it? Cameras pivoted, zooming closer to Eastwood's lined face. For the first time, he glanced at the folded paper in his pocket. His fingers tapped it once. Not yet. Fallon blinked. Is it a new movie? A charity? Eastwood's gaze met his unflinching. It's something you won't laugh at. A hot current raced through the audience. One woman in the third row coughed, just to break the silence. Fallon's card stack suddenly felt slippery in his hand. He attempted one last rescue. Well, before we get to that, can you tell us your favorite memory from set? Maybe lighten Eastwood cut him off? Lightening the mood is how we lost the plot. He straightened, shoulders squaring as if he were about to testify in court. People think truth comes gentle. It doesn't. It drags its boots. Another backstage whisper, if he goes political, standards and practices will lose it. Fallon heard none of it. Kay could only see Eastwood's eyes unyielding volcanic, as if decades of film frames had burned themselves into a single unspoken frame inside his mind. Eastwood inhaled through his nose, slow and deep. Then, almost tenderly, he addressed the viewers at home. You tuned in for jokes, but jokes are a curtain. Pay attention to what lives behind them. Fallon searched for a quip, an anchor, anything. Words failed. In that breathless pause, something invisible tilted. The audience sensed it. The cameras caught it. Eastwood had not stormed out yet, but everyone knew an earthquake often starts with a silent shift before the roar. Somewhere behind Clint's eyes, a secret weight waited to drop. And no studio cue could stop gravity. Fallon cleared his throat, voice nearly a whisper. We have to take a break. Applause signs lit up, but few clapped. As the band struck a muted chord and the cameras pulled back, Eastwood remained still, a dark lighthouse in a sea of artificial brightness. Holding a message others didn't dare read aloud, and every heart in the room beat faster, wondering what storm would follow when the show returned. The studio lights came back from commercial. But something felt different. The music played, the applause signs blinked, and Jimmy Fallon smiled into the camera, but the energy was fractured. A hush, almost invisible but deeply felt, had settled over the room. The live audience clapped on instinct, not excitement. Everyone knew they weren't just watching a show anymore. They were watching. A line being crossed in real time. Welcome back, Fallon said, trying to sound cheerful. We're here with the legendary Clint Eastwood. The words sounded small now, scripted, almost meaningless. Eastwood hadn't moved. He sat upright, that folded paper still tucked. Inside his jacket, one leg crossed slowly over the other like a man who had come to finish something. His eyes scanned the room, not the audience, not the cameras, but the walls. Like he was measuring the space, watching for someone. Fallon tried again. So, Clint, let's talk legacy. You've directed more than 30 films. You've played some of the most iconic characters in Hollywood history. What keeps you going? There was a pause. Eastwood didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared at Fallon and asked a question of his own. You ever heard of a man named Carl Dandridge? The studio went silent again. Fallon blinked. I don't think so. You should have, Eastwood replied. He was a screenwriter in the 80s. Smart, sharp, wrote a script about government control using television as a tool. Said they'd use laughter to numb the audience. Said comedy would be the perfect mask. He leaned forward, voice lower. He disappeared 2 weeks after the script hit a producer's desk. Fallon's smile faded. He laughed nervously. Sounds like a conspiracy theory. Eastwood didn't blink. No theory. I read the script. It was buried. I knew the producer who got the first copy. He told me to never mention it. And then, just like that gone, there was murmuring in the audience. Fallon shifted in his chair. Clint. You sang Hollywood. I'm saying we stopped being storytellers, Eastwood cut in, and started being gatekeepers. We decide what people laugh at. We choose what truth they hear. And we use shows like this to make them forget what matters. Fallon took a sip of water, buying time. The producer's voice echoed in his earpiece. Pivot, Jimmy. Pull back. Make a joke. Get control. He forced a smile. "'Kay, well, I'll admit that's the heaviest conversation we've had on this stage ever. But you're Clint Eastwood. You've earned the right to get serious." He chuckled weakly. "Just don't go full Dirty Harry on me." Still no smile from Clint. "You think this is serious, Jimmy?" He said, "This is a warning." Fallon's grip on his mug tightened. He looked toward the control booth briefly, where the executive producer was now visibly pacing. The tension deepened when Eastwood reached into his jacket and finally pulled out the folded piece of paper. It was yellowed, old, but clearly handled with care. He opened it slowly and placed it gently on Fallon's desk. "This is a transcript from 1994, Eastwood said. "Back when studios started taking government funds in exchange for cooperation. You know what that means?" Fallon shook his head. "I think you're exaggerating." "No, I'm finally telling the truth." He pointed to a highlighted section on the document. "Right there, NBC, labeled as a strategic entertainment. Asset during a classified operation." The clip spread like wildfire. By midnight, the phrase Clint Eastwood flash drive was trending #1 worldwide. Millions had already seen the shaky audience video. Eastwood laying down the yellowed paper, Fallon refusing to touch it. Then the flash drive. The video ended with Clint walking off stage, leaving behind a silence that spoke louder than anything said. But that silence didn't last long. Within the hour, fringe news sites lit up with articles claiming the document was real. Others said it was fake, a publicity stunt, or the rantings of an aging actor with a grudge. Still, the seed had been planted. Screens across America replayed the moment over and over, the paper, the flash, the line, because no one else would. Inside NBC headquarters, security had cleared the Fallon studio. Lawyers arrived fast and tight-lipped. Jimmy Fallon sat in a dressing room, hunched over his phone, scrolling through the storm. His face was pale. The producer knocked once and entered. "They want to know what was on the drive," she said. "We need to respond." Fallon looked up. "I don't have the drive." Her voice lowered. "Clint never left it behind." A pause. "You're saying he took it with him?" "No, I'm saying it's gone. He either handed it off, or we were never supposed to find it." Somewhere? In Manhattan, Eastwood sat in the back of a black SUV, headed for an undisclosed location. His assistant, a former Navy intelligence officer named Rachel Kerwin, rode beside him. She held the drive in her hand. "You're sure about this?" she asked. Clint nodded. "I've carried these files for decades. I'm too old to keep secrets." Rachel hesitated. "They're going to come after you." "They already did years ago. They just didn't finish the job." They were headed to a trusted contact, an international journalist named Victor Halabi, known for exposing state-sponsored propaganda during the Syrian Information War. Victor had gone dark for 2 years. Only Rachel knew where to find him. Meanwhile, inside a cold federal building in Virginia, red warning lights blinked to life in a glass-walled surveillance center. A young analyst leaned forward in disbelief. "Sir," she said, "we have a problem." "What is it?" replied the supervisor. She enlarged a paused frame from the Eastwood video. Not the paper, not the drive, the background, just a reflection caught in a polished coffee mug. It was a man, not part of Fallon's crew, standing behind a camera. "I ran it through facial recognition," she said. "He's not NBC's staff. He's ex-intelligence. Used to be with a joint propaganda task force out of Langley. Disappeared in 2013. The supervisor stood. "Why was he on that stage?" "I think Eastwood wasn't alone." Fallon was now back in his apartment, surrounded by advisors and legal reps. He looked like a man in free fall. Every network had called. The White House had called. Someone from the FCC wanted an emergency statement. Fallon shook his head. You guys don't get it. I didn't ask for this. Doesn't matter, said a senior NBC executive. You were the platform. That's all they need. On-screen clips rolled of political commentators, former intelligence officials, and rival comedians all dissecting the moment. This was more than a walk-off, said one host on CNN. Eastwood dropped a bomb. And depending on what's on that flash drive, we might be looking at a scandal far deeper than anyone expected. Some speculated the flash drive contained old Black Ops files. Others said it had lists of journalists compromised by covert influence programs. But one leak from an anonymous whistleblower ignited everything. The term Project Wildcard had been written in bold red across one of the recovered documents. No one could confirm what it was. But intelligence insiders speaking anonymously hinted that Wildcard was a Cold War media initiative designed to insert scripted ideas into popular American shows, especially comedy. If what Eastwood claims is real, said the whistleblower, then every late-night show host for the last 30 years has been part of a larger invisible system. Fallon sat in stunned silence as that segment aired. Someone on his team muted the TV. You need to issue a denial, his lawyer said. Right now. Fallon whispered, what if I've been part of it and never knew? Elsewhere, Victor Halabi's bunker-style apartment had become a new war room. Rachel plugged in the flash drive. Dozens of folders appeared, PDFs, redacted, memos, security briefings, taped conversations. Victor's eyes widened. This is a media playbook. Worse, Rachel said, it's a confession. Inside one file, a document labeled Late Night Objectives, Phase 3 detailed instructions for program producers during election seasons. Terms like narrative injection, satirical insulation, and target deflection filled every page. Victor stood. We need to go live. Clint, quiet for a long time, finally said, not yet. Wait for the reaction. Let them sweat. Let them try to bury it first. And back at NBC, that's exactly what was happening. Executives argued about deleting segments, issuing takedowns, and blaming the incident on Eastwood's age and mental state. But the internet had moved faster. Hackers had already cloned the flash drive upload. Copies began popping up in encrypted forums. One file audio labeled Late Show Complicity, November 2016, included a voice that sounded unmistakably like Fallon reading pre-written talking points about a leaked political scandal. 2 full days before it broke in the press. Fallon stared at the wall, ghost white. They used me, he whispered. From the corner of the room, a voice replied, no, Jimmy, they trained you. Fallon turned. It was his longtime stage manager. Face unreadable. You really thought those joke cards came from your writers every night? And suddenly, Jimmy Fallon understood the joke had always been on him. And now the world was finally in on it. The morning after the storm, headlines. Didn't wait for confirmation. They shouted in bold fonts across screens, papers, and news alerts. Eastwood exposes media program. Flash drive ignites global scandal. Project Wildcard. Intel ops linked to late-night TV, NBC, Fallon, and the shadow script. People woke up confused and angry. Some refused to believe it. Others felt something cold had finally clicked into place. A suspicion they'd buried every time a joke seemed to rehearsed. Every time comedy bent gently toward one political direction now, the stage lights had turned forensic. And the curtain wasn't closing. In New York, inside NBC headquarters, Fallon sat in a private conference room surrounded by senior executives, attorneys, and a crisis PR firm. No phones were allowed. Windows were covered. The mood was toxic. You're being labeled complicit. The lead counsel said. We need to separate you from Eastwood immediately. Fallon stared at the table. What if he's right? You don't have the luxury of believing that. Another voice shot back. You're the face of this network. You either denounce it, or we all go down together. Fallon looked up, hollow-eyed. Do you remember when we interviewed that senator before the 2016 election? The one with the charity scandal. Yes, I was told not to ask about it. They said the audience didn't want negativity. They gave me cue cards. He paused. I asked who approved the script. They said, DC? I thought it meant the control room. The lawyer leaned forward. You're telling us you were forced. I'm telling you, Fallon replied. I stopped asking questions, crossed the Atlantic in an old embassy. Basement converted into a secure studio. Victor Halabi prepared to go live with the contents of the flash drive. The files had been backed up, encrypted, and uploaded to a dozen secure locations. Rachel stood by with a satellite phone and 3 burner devices. Eastwood, now the reluctant centerpiece of a global story, adjusted a worn earpiece. Victor faced the camera. Good evening. What you're about to see is not an opinion piece. It is evidence. Leaked, authenticated, and verified. The live stream exploded online. Within minutes, millions watched as documents appeared on screen. Operation Wildcard. Media asset lists. Memos linking late-night hosts, producers, and even entertainment journalists to psychological operations meant to shape public opinion, not by lying directly, but by laughing away inconvenient truths. Then came the videos. One by one, internal, briefings recorded on handheld cameras played. A trainer spoke to young writers at a major network. Your job isn't to be funny. Your job is to neutralize anger. Mock what's dangerous so it stops feeling dangerous. Humor is sedation. The backlash came instantly. Newsrooms split in half. Some anchors demanded investigations. Others claimed Eastwood was being used. Politicians lined up on both sides. An emergency hearing was called in Congress. Fallon was issued a subpoena. But something more immediate happened, something Eastwood had predicted. The viewers began turning off the shows. Ratings for late-night comedy dropped by 40%. In one night. Hashtags like #TruthBeforeLaughter and #StopTheScript dominated online platforms. Influencers previously loyal to network entertainment began calling for a media reckoning. Inside NBC, an emergency broadcast was drafted. Fallon would issue a statement live, a full apology, a denial. No one agreed. They gave him 2 hours to decide. He sat alone in his dressing room, staring at the mirror. The quiet tick of the clock was louder than the laughter he once lived for. He pulled out an old folder, fan letters, notes from past guests, moments when the show still felt real. At the bottom, a letter from his father. Speak truth, even if your voice shakes. He knew what he had to do. At exactly 8 p.m., the screen lit up. NBC special address. Jimmy Fallon responds. Outside the NBC headquarters, a wall of protesters had gathered. Some held signs. Unscript the nation. Comedy shouldn't be control, and we deserve the truth. Others wore expressions not of rage, but of betrayal, like fans. Who'd found out the magician's hat was full of wires and lies? What had once been innocent entertainment now felt like manipulation with a punchline. Across the street, reporters shouted into live cameras. We are standing outside what used to be the most watched late-night studio in America. Tonight, its host has admitted to following external scripts tied to a secretive program called Project Wildcard. Inside the building, Jimmy Fallon sat alone in his office. His live admission had ignited a media firestorm, one even his bosses couldn't extinguish. Social media platforms were ablaze with millions replaying his words. Some of the scripts were sent from outside this building, and yes, I read them anyway. The network executives hadn't spoken to him since. In Washington, hearings were being scheduled. Former CIA officials, media producers, and intelligence contractors were being subpoenaed. Whispers spread that other comedians across networks had also been involved, some knowingly, some not. A late-night empire was trembling. And somewhere in a secure hotel room, Clint Eastwood and Victor Halabi watched the fallout unfold. Rachel sat across from them, eyes on the monitor, clicking through folders that still hadn't been released. "You've dropped enough to shake the tree," she said. "But there's still one file you haven't leaked." Clint nodded. The backbone. Victor leaned forward. Project Wildcard wasn't just media manipulation. It was election conditioning, cultural redirection. And according to this, he tapped a folder labeled Phase 4 Foreign Partners. It went global. Rachel opened it. Inside were lists of foreign broadcasters, production companies, even influencers, all flagged as participants or targets. Logos from British, Canadian, German, and even Australian media groups appeared in the documents. This wasn't just an American operation, she said. It was international conditioning through entertainment. Victor paced the room. It means what's coming next isn't a scandal. It's a geopolitical storm. Clint sat quietly, the weight of decades in his eyes. They'll deny it. They'll say I'm just a bitter old man. Victor turned to him. They already tried. But people are listening now. You broke the silence and Fallon cracked the wall. But if we release this file, we won't just be revealing manipulation, we'll be indicting entire governments. Clint didn't flinch. Then let's do it. But Rachel paused. We can't just drop it like the others. This has names, diplomats, financial transfers. If we leak it raw, people could get hurt. Victor nodded. We need allies in real journalism, people with reach and principles. Who do you trust? Clint asked. Victor's lips thinned. No one fully. But I know who's desperate for redemption. Edward Saito. Saito was a disgraced Pulitzer-winning reporter who once exposed a pharmaceutical government cover-up, only to be ruined when his own network turned against him. He now ran a small but growing independent news channel. He'd been waiting for a story big enough to make the world care again. That night, Victor made the call. Within 6 hours, Saito arrived at a hidden rendezvous spot, an empty church, on the city's edge. He walked in cautiously. Camera crew minimal. When he saw Clint, he froze. "You're really doing this?" Saito asked. Clint stood slowly. "We all sold pieces of the truth. I just want to buy a little back." Saito took the flash drive. "You understand this could fracture alliances?" Victor stepped in. "Then let them fracture. Truth doesn't serve nations. It serves people." As dawn approached, Saito's team worked around the clock. They fact-checked, cross-referenced, and decrypted communications. Every layer of the file exposed deeper coordination between entertainment arms and intelligence branches across continents. Hours later, Saito's broadcast went live. "Good morning," he said to camera. "Today you will see documents showing that what began as a Cold War information campaign called Project Wildcard evolved into a global entertainment influence network. Not fiction, not theory, documented, verified, and orchestrated to mold public perception through scripted programming. The evidence included payment records, message templates, and communication logs between government liaisons and show producers. The most shocking file of all, a document titled Audience Calibration Metrics, detailing how viewer emotions were tracked in real time during episodes of comedy shows, laughter, anger, distraction. Data fed directly into intelligence. Reports across the world. Media outlets exploded. Governments scrambled to distance themselves. Politicians denied knowledge. Former hosts of beloved programs claimed they were never told where their scripts came from. But the people weren't buying it. Within 48 hours, several primetime shows were suspended. International media unions called for independent investigations. Citizens across cities held vigils outside news studios, holding signs that read, "Give us back reality." In Washington, the Senate issued an emergency statement. A full bipartisan investigation into media-government partnerships will commence immediately. Any individuals found to have compromised the public's trust for political or psychological gain will be held accountable. Back in their temporary hideout, Rachel watched the broadcast with tears in her eyes. Victor asked, "Do you think we just changed the world?" Clint looked down at his hands. "I think we finally gave it a choice." He stood, walked slowly to the window, and stared at the sunrise. "I don't know how much time I have left," he said, "but I wanted to spend it reminding people what truth sounds like, even if it comes from someone they didn't expect." Behind him, the church bells rang. Somewhere in the distance, another screen lit up. Another host was being questioned, and another nation was waking up to the laughter they never questioned. And the silence that had always followed. The days that followed felt like history cracking open in real time. Across the United States and Europe, once beloved comedy shows vanished from schedules overnight. Network executives resigned. Government officials scrambled. And every newsroom left, right? Independent was forced to cover the same impossible headline. Project Wildcard confirmed. A global PC ops operation. Using late-night comedy as psychological shield. International summits were called. Former allies began demanding explanations. Leaks showed more than just America's late-night shows had been compromised. Talk shows in Britain, France, even Japan and Brazil had received narrative support from unnamed foundations, most with silent ties to defense departments. People were angry, but more than that, they were disoriented. For decades, they had laughed along, trusted faces, clever jokes, nightly comfort. Now it felt like the laughter had been engineered, not for entertainment, but for manipulation. In Washington, D.C., the first congressional hearing on Project Wildcard opened with unexpected gravity. The chamber was packed. Camera crews lined the walls. Former officials from the Department of Defense, CIA, and Federal Communications Commission were seated in the front rows. At the center of it all sat Jimmy Fallon, no longer a celebrity host, but a witness. Senator Alina Garza, chair of the Intelligence Committee, opened the hearing. "Mr. Fallon," she said calmly, "do you believe you were used?" Fallon cleared his throat. He looked older, quieter. "I didn't think so, but I do now." The room held its breath. Garza continued, "Did you ever knowingly read lines that originated from any political or government source?" He hesitated. "I didn't know the source at first. The scripts came from upstairs. I assumed it was the producers. It was only later, after Clint Eastwood's appearance, that I recognized some of the same wording from classified files." "You believe you were being handled?" Fallon nodded. "We all were. Some of us more than others. Some of us pretended not to notice." The audience murmured. Camera. Flashes burst like fireworks. Meanwhile, deep inside a bunker near the Swiss border, Victor Halabi, Rachel Kerwin, and Clint Eastwood watched the hearing live. The screen showed Fallon testifying, Eastwood's flash drive sitting in an evidence box behind him. Victor leaned forward. He's holding the line. Clint said nothing. His eyes were fixed on Fallon, the man he once saw as a puppet, now fighting to reclaim his own voice. Rachel clicked open her laptop. "We're getting another upload." Someone just sent a file labeled Wildcard Legacy Phase V. Victor's expression tightened. "There's another phase." Rachel opened it. Side were names. Dozens. Maybe. Hundreds. Talk show hosts, movie producers, tech influencers. Some long retired, some still at the center of global media empires. At the top of the list, a man currently being considered for Secretary of State. She whispered Clint. "This goes even deeper." Clint didn't flinch. "Then we keep going." Back in D.C., the hearing took a sudden turn. Former Pentagon contractor was brought in, Thomas Urich. He once worked on domestic messaging strategies during the late 2000s. A slight man with tired eyes, Urich laid bare what he called the entertainment gateway doctrine. It wasn't about lying, Urich explained. It was about redirecting. When people laughed, they dropped their guard. When they trusted a host, they didn't question the narrative. We learned we didn't have to silence truth. We just had to surround it with enough jokes to make it disappear. The room fell silent. The Capitol was surrounded by silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that falls before history changes. Rows of National Guards stood watch. Reporters whispered in hallways. Inside the chamber, cameras focused on a single chair soon to be filled by the man who started it all. Clint Eastwood walked slowly, his frame thinner than the legends remembered, but his gaze just as sharp. The room stood as he entered. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just sat, placed a single sheet of paper before him, and waited for the questioning to begin. Senator Alina Garza spoke first. "Mr. Eastwood, thank you for being here. Do you swear to tell the truth?" Clint looked up. "I didn't survive 95 years to start lying now." There were chuckles, nervous ones. Mr. Eastwood Garza continued. "Can you tell this committee why you chose to expose Project Wildcard? Why now?" Clint leaned forward. "Because it stopped being a secret and started being a sickness." The silence in the room deepened. "I was approached in the 90s, he said. "Not by the government directly. Foundations, media partners. They said they wanted to guide the public narrative. I said no, most didn't." "And the flash drive?" Garza asked. "Was given to me by someone who used to work inside a private intelligence group," he explained. "Said if he disappeared, I'd know what to do." "Is that person still alive?" Clint paused. "No." A ripple of unease moved through the chamber. Garza leaned closer. "Do you believe the media today can still be trusted?" Clint exhaled slowly. "I think it wants to be trusted. But it's built on sand. And that sand was shaped by people who saw truth as a tool, not a right." He then unfolded the sheet of paper. This was written by a wildcard content engineer in 2007. It outlines what they called laughter as policy. He read aloud, "Humor lowers resistance to messaging. Use satire to mask directives. Insert commentary through likable figures. Challenged? Dismiss as just a joke. If effective, repeat." The room fell utterly silent. Garza looked stunned. "Was that used on American citizens?" "Millions," Clint replied. "Nightly. 4 decades." The committee recessed. Outside, crowds surged as news networks played the testimony live. Phones lit up worldwide. More than 20 nations announced formal reviews of media government partnerships. NBC, ABC, BBC, and other global giants faced walkouts from their own journalists. Several comedians resigned. Writers came forward with their own admission script notes from consultants. Joke rejections with political motives, even outright censorship of segments critical of government policies. In Berlin, a former producer broke down live on air. "We weren't making comedy," she wept. "We were building a firewall." By nightfall, governments issued joint statements acknowledging the role of covert narrative control in civilian entertainment. Lawsuits were filed, emergency bills drafted. But back in the church hideout, Victor Halibé watched it all with something close to dread. "This doesn't feel like victory," he said. Rachel nodded. "It's only the beginning." They had received new intel, an intercepted file showing another planned Operation Wildcard 2.0, a next-generation system not reliant on comedians or hosts. It used AI-driven satire bots, personality-based video clips, and meme targeting algorithms. More subtle, more powerful, invisible. Victor looked at Clint. "We pulled the curtain back, and behind it is a bigger curtain. Clint stood slowly. Then we keep pulling. Rachel closed the laptop. There's a press conference tomorrow. Fallon's expected to speak. Fallon had vanished since the hearings. Rumors flew breakdown. Resignation, exile. But the world hadn't forgotten. His show set had been torn down. His stage, once a sanctuary for laughter, was now a symbol of silence. The next morning, cameras flashed as Fallon appeared on the Capitol steps. No suit, no crowd. Just a mic and a face that had aged 10 years in 10 days. I became a puppet, he said. Not because I was forced. It's because I stopped asking who was holding the strings. He pulled a small note from his pocket. This is from Clint. He gave it to me before the hearing. Says, you still have a voice. Use it. Don't just apologize and do. He looked up, said, today, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm offering cooperation, full access to production records. Name every hand that ever fed me a line. That moment sparked a second wave. Other comedians followed. Old writers stepped forward. A national reckoning turned global. In the final weeks of the hearings, Clint was asked to testify one last time. Garza's question was simple. Do you believe trust can be restored? Clint looked around the chamber at politicians, journalists, and Americans watching from home. No, he said, not restored, rebuilt, from scratch, with people willing to lose everything just to tell the truth. His voice cracked. I gave my life to stories. What a shame it took a broken one to finally matter. He stood up, without help, without fanfare, and walked away. The screen faded to black. In that silence, no one laughed. But somewhere, truth was laughing, because after all the noise, it had finally been heard.